Hello and welcome to this new video. My name is Jan and I'm a Fortify Pre-Sales Consultant based in Germany. And in this video, I want to go through the whole installation of ScanCentral SAST and how you can actually configure it the right way. But before we get into the installation part, I also want to mention that if you have any kind of questions, please let us know in the comments. And I also try to link everything that I will use in this video in the description, so please have a look at that as well. And you can also use the timestamps in this video to go directly to the topic of your choice. But before we can actually start with the installation, I want to go through a short agenda because we have different topics for this video. So first of all, I want to give you an overview about the ScanCentral SAST components itself, so that you can understand which kind of components we need and where you can find it and how to install them. We are also going through the documentation, so I will guide you where you can find all these information if you need some more details. And I also want to explain a little bit more what we are going to use in this example. Then we will take care of the installation and configuration of all these components. So ScanCentral SAST controller, the sensor and the client. And at the end of the video, I also have some tips and tricks for you. So before we can actually start, let's start with the first topic, and that's the overview about the ScanCentral SAST components. So before we can actually start with this, I quickly want to highlight, if you have any kind of detailed question or if you want to know a little bit more detail about the whole installation, this whole video is based on the documentation. So you can find these documentations if you are going to the browser and just type in microfocus.com/documentation. And very important for ScanCentral SAST here is if you searching for documentation related to ScanCentral SAST, you need to search for the Software Security Center, because when it comes to the documentation, ScanCentral SAST is part of the Software Security Center. So just search for the Software Security Center, select your needed version, and there you can find the Fortify ScanCentral SAST installation, configuration, and usage guide. You can also find anything regarding the system requirements in here, because we have some system requirements that we need to meet, of course. But if you need any more detail on that, please have a look at the documentation. And with that, we can go through the components parts. So first of all, to give you a good overview about the whole components, this is very important to understand which kind of components we need, why we need them, and how to configure it the right way. So first of all, when we're talking about ScanCentral SAST, we have something called the ScanCentral SAST controller. And the ScanCentral SAST controller is mainly the brain or the main component of ScanCentral SAST, because the ScanCentral SAST controller is managing all scans and also talking about to any other kind of components that you can see in a second. So basically, this is the middle of ScanCentral SAST. So when we're talking about ScanCentral, we also need, of course, some sensors, because sensors are basically the things that are running the scan for us. So that means the ScanCentral controller is more or less something like a manager or an organizer about the whole ScanCentral SAST infrastructure, as you can see in a second when everything is up here. But the sensors are mainly the workhorse or the main worker when it comes to scanning. So the sensors are actually these type of machines that actually running the scan. And you can manage these sensors by using sensor pools. So that means if you have different sensors with different Fortify versions in different environments that you want to use, you can absolutely do this. But you need to manage that in some way, and there you can use the sensor pool. So that means, for example, if you have a pool with low hardware capacity for something like microservices that you want to scan, you can easily set up some sensors with low hardware and put these into a sensor pool called low hardware, for example. And you can also set up some sensor machines with heavy hardware so that you can actually run bigger scans on it very smoothly. Then you can create a sensor pool called heavy hardware or whatever you want. But this is basically the main reason why you can create sensor pools. So that is basically all about sensors. And when we talk about how we can actually get the source code to the sensors, we need to use a client. And when it comes to clients, we have two different options there. So first of all, we have the embedded client, as you can see here. This is very important because this is a client that you only get if you install the Fortify Static Code Analyzer. So you need to install the Fortify Static Code Analyzer to get this embedded client. But we also have the option to use a standalone client. So that's basically a utility that you can basically unzip and use. I will explain that in the later part of this video and show it to you. But this is basically a very good way to offload the translation as well as scanning. So when we compare these two clients, the main difference here is with the embedded client, you can offload only the scan if you want. So you can do the translation part of a Fortify Static Code Analyzer scan right here and just sending the scanning part to the sensors. And if you're using the standalone client, you can basically only offload the translation and scan. So that means you need to have a look at our system requirements, because there is a document where you can have a look at all supported languages for this. We will also go going through that in a later part, but please keep in mind that the standalone client can be run without Fortify Static Code Analyzer, and for the embedded client you need the Static Code Analyzer. And then, of course, we have our Software Security Center. So in this case, we are not going to install the Software Security Center. This is already up and running because we already have some other videos on that. And the software security is mainly, of course, the interface where we are going to interact with the scans, or where we can see which kind of sensors online, get all the information about the scans, so the UI basically. And these are all the components that we need. And in our case, we are going to install the controller on a Windows server. So in this case, we are going to install basically not only the controller, we are also going to install the sensor and an embedded client on one single Windows server. So I can't recommend to do this on a production base. I highly recommend to split these components up if you try to set up a production environment. But for this demo purposes, I thought it would be easier if we are only using one server. So please keep in mind, in this case, we are going to install the ScanCentral SAST controller, the sensor, and the embedded client on one Windows server. But I also want to demonstrate you the standalone client. So for that, I decided to use just a standard Ubuntu machine, just to show you how the standalone client is working. And last but not least, of course, we have our Software Security Center, and as I said, this is already up and running and we can start using this. And with that, I would say we can start with the installation and configuration of the ScanCentral SAST controller, because this is the first thing that we need to do. And for that, we need to install the Software Security we need to install the ScanCentral SAST controller, and we need to connect it to the software security. So this is basically the first step that we need to do. And for that, I will switch now to our Windows machine. Okay, welcome to our new and fresh installation of Windows Server 2019. So this is a server running on AWS with 16 cores and 32 gigabytes of RAM. But as I said, this is just a demo of how you can actually have an overview about the installation process. So I highly recommend to have a look at the system requirements if you try to set this up for your own. So in this case, as I said, this is a fresh and new machine. The only thing that I installed on this machine is basically Java, because this is the only thing that we need to have here. So if you go to the command line, you can just check the version. So in this case, I'm using the Java 11 version. So this is very important. Please check this before you can start with the installation. And basically, when we're talking about the installation, the only file that you need for this is the Fortify ScanCentral controller zip file. And you will get these downloading in our portal. So please keep in mind that you need a license for this, of course. And after you get this, we can basically unzip it here. And we will move it to a choice, to a directory of our choice. So in this case, I'm going to put this under C program files, and I will create a new folder called Fortify, and I paste it in here. And now, as you saw in the beginning, we need to make sure that the connection to all other components can be established. And before we can start with the installation of the servers, we need to configure some authentication tokens. So that means if we are going to this folder, we can go to Tomcat, Web Apps, ScanCentral Controller, Web and Classes. And there you can find a file called config properties, and I'm going to open this up with let's say Visual Studio Code. That should be fine, and where we can find anything. So let's get through this. So basically, this is a file where you can configure everything related to the ScanCentral SAST controller. So that means we can configure the worker authentication token. So in this case, worker means sensor. So please don't be confused with this. If you ever see something like worker, this is the ScanCentral SAST sensor. So worker is sensor. So that means this sensor or worker authentication token is very important when it comes to the connection from the ScanCentral SAST controller to the sensor. So please keep that in mind. When we're talking about the client, here's also another authentication token that we can change. And there are also a ton of other options, but I would highly recommend to have a look at our documentation here, because if we open this up, I will also put this into the description. We can see basically everything that we can configure here. So in this case, I'm only going through the necessary things for our case, but please keep in mind, if you have a special installation or want to make sure, for example, if you want to configure the license and infrastructure manager, for example, you need to check this. But with this, I would say we can actually edit our parameters. So first of all, we need to edit the authentication tokens. Of course, we can use this, but let's change this to another value. And please keep in mind, or please make sure there's no spaces at the end or at the beginning, because this can cause some issues. So please put this completely in here. That should be fine, and save this for later use, of course. So the next thing that we need to configure, or for this very simple and basic installation, we need to configure the SSC URL. So for that, I already checked if this is up and working, and it is. So we can reach this from our machine. So I will put the link or the URL in here. So in this case, we are using another system. And the only thing that we now need to change for our demo is one thing. Let's search for it. Where is it? The SSC ScanCentral controller secret. And this is very important when it comes to the connection from the SSC to ScanCentral, to the ScanCentral controller. So this is the token or the secret that we need to use, or that we need to put in our SSC later. So in this case, to make things a little bit easier, I also want to change this into Fortify SSC. So the only thing that we need to do now is to save the file and just close it. So after that, we can start installing the servers. And for that, we need to go into the controller and into Tomcat and bin. So let's open this up in the command prompt that I can show you how you can install it now. Oh, sorry. So, okay. The next thing, or the only thing that we now need to do is you see something like the servers.bat file. And we need to use this batch file to install our service. So that means we need to select the servers.batch file and say, okay, we want to install the ScanCentral controller. And now we can set a name of our choice. So in this case, let's say I want to name it ScanCentral controller, and that should be fine. So now we can just hit enter, and as you can see, this is why we need Java, because it will put the Java home path in here, and also of course for Tomcat itself. And after that, you can see the service has been installed. So we can go to our services and have a look at our services. So in this case, we only need to do some small things. So as you can see, here's our servers, and we need to click on properties, and we want to make sure, of course, the startup type is automatic, and in our case, we also want to make sure that it can interact with the desktop. So make sure this is on, apply, and after that, we can start the ScanCentral controller. And while we're waiting until this is up, we can actually go to the SSC and log in, because there we need to configure the connection between the ScanCentral SAST controller and the SSC. So now you can see we have no ScanCentral tab at the top because we need to enable it first. So for that, you need to go to the administration page, go to configuration and ScanCentral SAST. And there you can find this configuration. We need to enable it, of course, and then we need to put our ScanCentral controller URL in here. So basically, I think that should be up and running. Now we can check this using, of course, our browser. Just put in, just put in the localhost with the default port of Tomcat. This is 8080, and just put a /ScanCentral -controller into it, and now we can see something like this. And if you can see something like this, you probably set the ScanCentral SAST controller up in the right way. So that means we can use this now, and as this is on another system, we need to use something like the IP address to get this in here, because if we type in localhost, it will not have any kind of connection. So in this example, we are going to use the public IP address just to make things easier. Then we can set the ScanCentral poll period. So that means every time it should be refreshing the ScanCentral SAST page inside of our SSC. And now we need to put in the controller shared secret. And this is exactly this here. So we can use this, put it in here, save it. And now you can see we need to restart the SSC. So let's do this. I will do this on another display. Restart. And now we can just wait until the SSC is back again, and we will have a look at ScanCentral SAST if we can see the controller in here. So just a second until the SSC is up and running again. Okay, so the SSC is now up and running again. One thing that I forgot to mention, we also should restart the ScanCentral controller service as well. So please make sure we restart the controller as well. And now we wait only some few seconds until this controller is up and running again. Yep, that should be fine. And now we can get into the ScanCentral tab. So that means if we click here, you can see the SAST bar is already enabled, and we click on controller and we can see where is our controller. So if you can see this, the connection between the ScanCentral SAST controller and the SSC is successful. So that is basically it when it comes to the ScanCentral SAST controller installation. So with that, I would say we can go back into our presentation, because now the next thing is, of course, that we want to install the ScanCentral SAST sensor, because now our controller is already up and running and we want to make sure that the sensor is also connecting to the controller and we can start using it. In this case, I'm only using the default pool for that, so I will not configure any kind of new pool, any kind of sensor pool. But of course, you can do this if you want. But in this case, I'm only go ahead with the default pool. So basically, what we need to do now is to install the sensor and make sure that the connection can be established to the controller. And for that, we are using the other token, or of the other authentication token that we set in our client properties file in here. So let's switch back to the machine once again. Just a second. So, okay, the first thing that we need to do when it comes to installing the sensor is basically to install the static code analyzer. So we need to install the Fortify static code analyzer, and please make sure that your system met the requirements, because in this case, we can use the normal system requirements from Fortify SCA. So that means let's open up the installation here. I prepared the file in here, and we can start the installation on our system. So let's agree this. Yep, that's completely fine. We need to put our license in here. And yeah, that is fine. No, I don't want to migrate. Very important here now, I want to install the sample source because I want to showcase a scan afterwards. So that means, yeah, it's fine. And now we can wait until the scan is finished and we can update our rule packs. So let's just wait a few more minutes or seconds until this is completed. Okay, now the rule pack update was successful and we can start to set up the sensor. So I just click here on OK, and the first thing that we need to do before we can actually start the sensor, we need to configure the configuration. So that means we need to configure the authentication token that we set before. So for that, you only need to go to the installation part or installation directory of Fortify SCA. And there you can find the, let's check this one more time, the core and directory config. And there you can find something called the worker properties. So as you can remember at the beginning, I said worker means sensor. So this is basically the same thing here. So we will open this up using Visual Studio Code again. And yep. The only thing that we need to set here is the worker authentication token. If you want to set up an encrypted token, please have a look at the documentation. But in this case, we only need to put in our token in here. So if we check the worker authentication token, let's put this into this file, make sure there's no spaces, save it, and that's it. After that, we can start establish the sensor. And when it comes to starting the sensor, we have basically two different ways. First of all, you can basically start it using the command line, using the ScanCentral utility from the source code analyzer. So when you go to the command line, you can basically use the command line to put in the following. Let's just a second. I have this open up on another window. So when it comes to the part of the command line installation, you can simply on Windows type in ScanCentral, the ScanCentral utility, the URL of the controller, and say I want to be a worker. Same for Linux as well, but in this case we are running this on Windows. And on Windows we have two different options. First of all, we can use the normal CLI option as here, but we can also set this up as a service. And this is basically what we are going to do now. So first of all, we need to change the directory here. So let's go into bin ScanCentral worker service, and I will open this up here. Because there you can see we have the setup worker service batch file, and this is responsible for setting the service up. So for that, we need to clarify some things. So let me put this in here, you can see it. And the first thing that we need to do is, of course, say setup worker service.batch. And the first thing that we need to put in here is the version of Fortify SCA that we already have been installed. So that means in this case, I installed 21.2.2. And in this case, you only need to put 21.2 in here. And the next thing that we need to configure is the URL of the ScanCentral controller to make sure the connection can be established. So that means we can use this one and paste it into here. And the last thing is, of course, the shared secret that we need to put in here. So that means the same as before. So Fortify SSC, and with that we can hit enter. And now it is asking you if you want to assign the sensor to a pool, to a specific pool. But as I said in the beginning, I am only using the default pool, so I'm not gonna assign it here. So I can just simply press enter. So in this case, you need to make sure that you're running the command line as an administrator. So this is very important if you set this up as a service on Windows. So please make sure that you set this up, and we can confirm it with yes, and the script was completed. So with that, we can go back to our services, refresh these, and search for Fortify ScanCentral Worker Service. So this is the default name for it. And here we need to do the same things as before. The startup type is automatic on default, so that is fine. But we need to make sure it can interact with the desktop because we want to use some files from this system. So please make sure that it's up and running, and we can hit start to start it. And we can go to the SSC, refresh it, and now we can just wait until the sensor is here. Okay, so the sensor is already up and running. So you can see if you click here a lot of metadata, so you can see which kind of SCA version we are using, which kind of operating system, how many processors we have available, how many memory. So you can really see a lot of details in here. And now, yeah, we are ready to get starting with the scanning. But before we can do this, I will quickly switch back to the presentation to get into the next part. So this is basically our infrastructure right now. So we have the ScanCentral SAST controller, the SSC is up and running, the sensor is up and running, we have a default pool, and that is completely fine. And now we want to start scanning, of course. So we need to use a client to start scanning. So that means in this case, I want to start with the standalone client. And for that, I need to switch to the Ubuntu system. So just give me a second and I will switch to the Ubuntu system. Okay, so welcome to the Ubuntu system. So before we can actually start scanning, I want to go back to the documentation first, because this is very important to understand. Because when we open up the documentation, let's do this right here. Sorry, this was the wrong one. So as you can see here in the documentation, we have two different options. First of all, we have the option of offloading scanning only. So this is the embedded client. And we have the offloading both translation and scanning options. So please have a look at this here if you want to use the standalone client. And one very important part here, and this is something that I mentioned in the beginning, is we only supporting offloading of translation and scan only for some certain program languages. So please have a look at the list here. Or have a look at the updated list on the latest documentation, where you can get an overview about which kind of languages we are actually supporting. Because in this case, we want to scan a basic Java application. So you can use this repo or you can use anything else. But in this case, this is a very simple Java application built with Maven that we can use for this scan. So as you can see, this is basically a demonstration of the Fortify scanning capabilities with AWS SDK, but never mind, this is a good example to show you how you can actually integrate this into a standalone client. So that means if we switch back to our client, just a second. If we switch back here, you can see that we have the source code in here, and I also have the Fortify ScanCentral client. So this is basically just a zip file that you can download and unzip, and after that you can use the utilities in there. So that means if we go into the Fortify ScanCentral client, you can see that we have, just as before, the core directory, and where you can find the config directory, and where we have something called the client properties. So please make sure that you added the client properties. So in this case, I'm going to show this to you. I already did this on another demonstration, but the only thing that you need to put here is, of course, the authentication token that you set before for the client, or the client. So that means if we switch back just one time, this is the controller configuration. Please use this one here. And with that, I think we can go back and start scanning. So basically what I'm going to use now is the ScanCentral utility for that. So that means if we just switch to our source code, I can demonstrate how you can actually work with this. So we are going to use the Fortify AWS Java SDK demo, and inside of here you can see that we have the source as well as the POM file for building it with Maven. So please make sure that you have Maven installed, of course, and test it before you actually scan it. So that means we want to translate and we want to offload the translation as well as the scanning, and we can do this by using our ScanCentral client, our standalone client. So that means in this case we need to go one directory back and need to go into the ScanCentral client directory and go into bin and choose ScanCentral. So please make sure this is executable, of course, and now we can actually start using it. So the first thing that you need to put here is basically the URL of the ScanCentral controller. So let me check this in another tab right on the other screen. Yep. So I will put this in here. And after that, we only need to say, okay, we want to start the client or the command, the scan itself. And we also need to include the build option, or not a build option, build tool. So if you're using something like Python, for example, you need to hit none in here. But in this case, we are using Maven, so we can put Maven in here. So if you want to get familiar with this, please have a look at the documentation. And after that, we can basically hit enter, and it will automatically pull every kind of dependency that we need for this scan and put it together in one file with the source code and send this package to the controller. So as you could see, this was successful, and we, oh, you can't see it, just a second. So as you can see, this was successful, and we submitted a job and received a unique token. So with that, we can basically go back to our SSC and have a look at our scan request, because now we can see we actually got a scan request, and we can see this is basically this is actually running. So we can see this is currently running, and we can wait until the result is here, because this is a very simple, a very basic application. This only should take some seconds in here. But before we get into this, oh, the scan is completed. So this was successful. And as you can see, this was only running the scan, not uploading it into Software Security Center. I will explain this in a second, how you can actually do this. But in this case, we can basically download the FPR file on our local machine and have a look at the results. We can also download the log file if we want. But yeah, this is basically it. And you can also see the scan arguments as well as everything else. And this is a good example how you can actually start a very basic scan. So that means now you can see the whole results in here. So this was successful. And now, as I said, I want to also show you how you can actually upload this into the Software Security Center to an application. For this, of course, we need, first of all, an application. So let's use, for example, the demo application here. So I will just delete this one here, but we do not have any kind of results in here. So this is basically a fresh new application called demo app, and this has the ID 7. So in this case, we can see it directly in the URL. So this is very important. We need this, and we also need a token to upload the results directly. So that means we need to go to the administration page, to users, token management, and create something called the ScanCentral controller token. So that means we need to save this and can use this. So that means let's switch back to the Ubuntu system once more. Clear everything up. And now we can use the same command as before. But now we want to upload the code. So that means we need to put upload at the end. Upload and start with version ID. So in our case, it was version. Oh, let's make it this way. So we can use version number. I think this was 7. Let's copy this in here. Application demo application. Yeah, it was 7. So we can go back here. Version ID is 7. And we also need to give it a up token. So this is basically the upload token. So that means we can put this in here. And let me just check if I forgot something, but I think that should be fine. So with that, we can also just hit enter as before, waiting until the package is successfully uploaded to the SSC. And yep, the job has submitted, and we can actually start having a look at the SSC again. So let's go back to ScanCentral, and now we can see the scan is actually running, and it already connected to the demo app version 1. So that means it was successful, and we can now just refresh and wait some seconds until the demo is done. And then we can have a look at the results directly inside of the application. So just the upload is queued. Yep, that's completely fine. So we can now go to the demo app. So in this case, we need to approve this, but you can easily set this up using your profile section. So in this case, let's approve it. Say, yes, we want to approve it, and just wait until it is finished. Complete. And now we can see our results using the ScanCentral SAST sensor here directly in SSC. So this is basically a very short demo of how you can use the standalone client. But let's switch back to the presentation once more to show you, or to say, tell you a little bit more about the embedded client. Because when we're talking about the embedded client, we want, of course, sometimes we want to only offload the scan. So that means, for example, if there's a language that is not supported by the standalone client, we can use the embedded client to actually offloading the heavy scan part of a Fortify scan. So that means in this case, we want to install and configure this client, this embedded client. And for this, we are using the already existing Fortify static code analyzer installation. So for that, let's switch back to our system and just close this right here. Yep, that is fine. And now for this example, I'm going to use the sample code that is directly inside of the installation directory of Fortify. So let's go to Fortify SCA and apps, go to samples, basic, and let's use 8-ball. This is a Java application, so very easy and easy to scan. And you can also have a look at the README file, because here you can see the different steps that are needed to actually do the scan. And the interesting part here is, of course, we can use the clean to use this on our system. Or let's basically do this directly. And yeah, first of all, we need to just a normal Fortify static code analyzer clean to make sure everything in case of temporary files is deleted. So just hit enter to do the clean. Then we will do the translation. So we will actually build the application to a mobile build session format in Fortify. And now we have this mobile build session connected to this build ID. And instead of scanning this now on our local system, we can actually use ScanCentral to offload the scan only. So that means before we can actually start scanning, we need to do one more thing, and that is to configure the client authentication token. So for that, we need to go to the Fortify SCA installation directory, go to core, config, and then we do not need the worker properties because this was for the sensor. We need the client properties. So please go in here, and as you can see, there's nothing in here, but in this case, we can use the same authentication token as before. So let's put this in here, save the file, and go back. So, but this is basically the whole setup that you need to do to make sure that the connection can be established. And now we can continue in the command line. So basically what we can do now is to use the ScanCentral utility. So if you use this and just type in help, you can actually see all the different things that we can do here. We can also see the worker thing to actually start a sensor, but in this case we want to use the start command to start a remote scan job. So that means we need to use ScanCentral and put URL of the ScanCentral controller in here. So let's use this one. Yep. And after that, we can say, okay, we want to start a scan. So that's basically it. But of course, we also want to pack or to connect this directly to the right application. So that means we need to have a look at our applications. And as you can see, we have something called 8-ball. And yeah, just let delete this. And as you can see, there's nothing in here, and this is the version 6. So we need to say, okay, I want to upload this to version ID 6, and we also need to provide the upload token. So let me search for that, just a second. I need to copy this out of here. So let's type in up token, put the token in here, and now we need to set the build ID as before. So here, so I will put this in here, 8 ball, and now we want to just hit scan. So that's it. So basically we can now hit enter, and it will automatically upload the mobile build session to the controller. So you can see it will export the mobile build session and handle it over to the controller. And now when we go back to the Software Security Center, to ScanCentral, and just wait a couple of seconds, we can see the scan will start. And basically we did the whole translation on this system and uploaded to the ScanCentral SAST controller. And now the sensor will take care of the scanning only. So let's wait. Okay, the scan is already completed. We can see now we submitted through the administrator, and now we can just have a look at 8 ball. Okay, there's no results. Let's check the command once again, or I will put the prepared command in here, just to make sure that I do not make any mistakes in pasting any kind of tokens in the wrong direction. So let's go to ScanCentral and wait until the scan is in here. Okay, so the scan is now here. So as you could see, I made some mistake in copy and pasting something from the command line, because now, as you can see, it is exactly the same. I think I made some mistakes in the token copy process, but doesn't matter. So that means if we say refresh, we can see upload was complete. So if we go to our 8 ball application version, we can see under the artifacts that the artifacts is already here. So we can say yes and improve it. And after that, we are able to see our results of just the remote scan in here. So yeah, this is basically it. And one little thing that I also want to mention here, you can also use, of course, any kind of plugins for our IDEs. So if we go to install the Fortify plugin on the Visual Studio Code, for example, we can also do the same process in here. So that means while this is installing, we can open up the same folder as before. So we can go to samples, basic, 8 ball, open this one up. Yep, we trust this. And now we can have a look at the file of the application, and we can actually start using our integration. So that means we can go to the Fortify integration, click on ScanCentral SAST, for example, and we only need to make sure that the controller is here. So that means let's put this in here. And we can also say we want to upload this, but in this case, I only want to showcase you that it's very easy possible using the IDE plugins as well. So we only click on scan, and it will automatically do the same that we've done here in the command line. And we can head back to ScanCentral. Just also wait a couple of seconds until the scan is here. And in the meantime, I also can talk a little bit more about some tips and tricks. So I already talked about avoiding spaces in the authentication token, but I also want to highlight or to mention it again. So please make sure you do not make any mistakes, put any kind of spaces inside of the configuration. Another very important thing is if you want to change the token. So let's say you want to change the token, you need to first change it in the controller config properties and then change it in the worker properties. So please make sure to first change it in the controller properties. And very, very important, the most important thing here is, of course, please make sure that every connection can be established. So please make sure there's no firewall issue, no port conflict, that all these things or all these components can communicate very well together. And I think that's all. So thank you very much for watching, and please leave a like if you find this video helpful. And as I said, you can find anything down below in the description when it comes to links and anything else. And if you have any kind of feedback, questions, please let us know. And with that, thank you very much and have a nice day.